All right, welcome back to Quick Theological Thoughts. I promise I'll try to be quick, which is going to be a broken promise. But anyway, today's interaction I want to do with Frank Turek. Frank Turek is an apologist, Christian apologist. He does a great job. He engages people all the time, unbelievers all over the place, atheists, college campuses. Good guy, but he's if you've followed different apologetic methods, you know he's obviously somebody against the presuppositional position, and I'm a presuppositionalist. And in the video, I want to show you how he claims to be showing evidence, right? Making philosophical arguments, then using evidence to prove that Christianity is true. And what I want to do is show how he's sneaking in his own presuppositions, and any quick atheist will see it. A sharp atheist will see that. Christopher Hitchens will see that. And so let's dive into the video and pull it up here. All right, here we go.
If space, matter, and time had a beginning, which is what even atheists are admitting now, that there was a beginning to space, matter, and time, what could have caused that? I mean,
okay, what could have caused that? Right. So if you're talking to an atheist, what could have caused that? I'm going to go with him here on this one. What could have caused that? But there's a presupposition here, right? Scripture's presupposition to that question is, in the beginning, God. But that's presupposed. It's the necessary explanation to this. He's trying to work his way backwards and say, look, we have an effect. There has to be a cause. Okay. Well, what caused the cause, right? We know there's cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. It's literally going to beg the question for the atheist. See how he solves this dilemma.
that's the effect. If space, matter, and time had a beginning, whatever caused space, matter, and time must transcend space, matter, and time.
All right, so whatever caused space, matter, and time must transcend it. Why? Why? The atheist, that's the question, right? That's the debate. And you just threw it out there. I agree with that conclusion, but I'm starting with something else, because I'm starting with the necessary preconditions for knowledge, the necessary preconditions for the laws of logic. So this is where we disagree on finer points. But again, he's relying here on a philosophical point, which I'm not against. But if you're talking to a sharp atheist, they're going to try to figure a way around this. And the only way to really properly answer this is to find out where the grounding is, right? Where's the grounding for this logic? That's where we're at. We're simply assuming a lot of things here on both sides.
In other words, the cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create, because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons can make choices. The cause would also have to be intelligent, to have a mind to make a choice. So I always ask audiences,
all right, so at this point, you could argue that this kind of goes along the thinking of Romans 1. Paul says, we know that God exists because we can see the characteristics of God in the creation, right? When you look at a painting, you can see the characteristics of the painter in the painting, but the painter is the precondition for the painting, okay? And we can work our way backwards, I guess you could say, but we're still assuming that there has to be a painter in there, right? You're still doing it, whether you realize it or not. And so he's right in saying, look, we can see in the creation these characteristics. Therefore, right? And the New Testament does say that. But we're also sneaking in our presuppositions, and we'll see that here in a second.
What do you think about when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause? You think about God.
Right. You think about God. We all agree, okay? The people that claim that they don't. Okay. But here's the kicker. Which God? He's going to ask that.
And they might say, well, how do you know it's the Christian God? And the answer is, we don't.
This is where the New Testament tells us, the Bible tells us as a whole, we all know that God exists. Now, how do we know it's the Christian God? Well, there's no other God, right? No other God exists. There's only one true and living God. So the question is it the Christian God? You know, he's asking, how do we know it is the Christian God? Well, the question isn't that at all. The Bible just simply assumes it. There is no other God. And he's saying at this point, we don't know. There's a sense in which it's true for the sinner, because the sinner is living in such rebellion against his Creator that we have lost that relationship with God. We have lost that ability to see God as He is, and so we need revelation. Right? This is the part that we're going to part ways here. He's going to say we don't, and I would say we do know that God exists. We do know it's the Christian God, even though we don't know Him. But how do we find out? How do we get to know the Christian God? And that's where we would agree, right? So, yeah, there's a sense in which he's right. We don't know it's the Christian God. But that's because we're so blind, we don't know where He is, right? We're stumbling in the dark. And we need God to open our eyes and see. His view of how that happens and my view of, the presuppositionalist view of how that happens are two different views. See how he solves the dilemma.
Unless we look at the evidence for Jesus, and if we see Jesus rose from the dead, then we can say that the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,989 years ago is the same being in whose divine nature created the universe out of nothing. So when you put those two things together, the first argument I just sort of gave was we call the cosmological argument, the argument from the beginning of the universe. And the other argument is the evidence for the resurrection. When you put those two things together, God exists and Jesus rose from the dead, you get the Christian God.
There's a sense of truth to that, but he's got it backwards, right? He's saying, we got the cosmological argument. We know that God exists because I worked my way backwards to figure out where He is. I worked my way up to Him, so I know that He exists. And then I look at the evidence, and I see the resurrection of Jesus, Christian God. He just snuck in, whether he realizes it or not, and I suppose most people just don't see it. They just don't see what they're doing. They actually believe they're being neutral, right? He actually believe. If I say this to the atheist, I got to say this to the Christian as well, right? If I say to the atheist, neutrality is a myth, and I hold them to that standard, how can I then turn around and say to Frank Turek, yeah, you're right, let's just look at the evidence, let's be neutral about it. Yeah, the evidence shows that Jesus was raised from the dead. The evidence, we're not neutral. The evidence itself is not neutral. All facts are God's facts. All truth is God's truth. And so what's being missed here is the big so what, the big yawn, right, for the non-Christian. Well, the evidence for the resurrection. Okay, when you argue evidence, the evidence of itself isn't God. The evidence of itself isn't God speaking to us necessarily, right? The evidence is just that. It's evidence. Scripture. So you get a guy that was raised from the dead. One atheist put it this way: weird things happen, right? Weird things happen. So what? It's a big yawn. What's the meaning of, I've got a friend who I've asked this 1,000 times. In fact, I've got several friends who I've asked this 1,000 times. What does the resurrection mean? How do you know what it means? How do you know that the resurrection is important? What is the meaning of the cross? When Jesus died, there were two other guys, one on each side of him, that died. They were crucified. Did their sins did their dying on the cross take away the sins of the world? Oh no. Well, how do you know that? Oh, divine revelation, special revelation. Oh, it's called the Scriptures. The Scriptures explain the resurrection. The Scriptures explain the crucifixion. The Scriptures explain the burial. The Scriptures explain the entire life of Jesus. The Scriptures are what was appealed to on the day of the resurrection. Jesus was walking on the road to Emmaus, or there were two walking on the road to Emmaus, and Jesus appears with these two guys, and they were like doubting, and Jesus does what? He explains to them what happened. And how did he do that? Well, look at the evidence. The evidence is that the stone rolled away, and then therefore he must have raised from the dead. True enough. But what does Jesus do? Jesus appeals, to the Scriptures. He appeals to God's revelation to us. So how do we really know? How do we know that the Christian God is the one true God? Because God has spoken. The Scriptures is God's voice to mankind. God spoke, and the evidence, this is a good use of evidence, correlates to what God has said. God explains the evidence. The artist explains the art and communicates through the art, right? The art itself, the art in and of itself is by itself is not explaining to us the artist. The artist is communicating through the art, and the art speaks to us because that's the medium by which we hear the voice of the artist. That's what's being smuggled through by Frank Turek and everybody else. We don't even realize we're doing it, I think. I like these guys, but they're missing that point. Let me try to say it again. The art, right? The art is the means by which the artist speaks. If I write a book, a diary, a novel, or whatever, and you read that book, it doesn't even occur to you that there's a writer of that book. And how is the writer communicating the ideas or whatever that's in the book to you? Well, through the words and pages and the letters and the ink and the means, that created means by which the ideas of the writer communicate. You don't start with the book and just assume that the book in and of itself is the thing talking to you, right? The book is the means by which the writer is talking to you. We do that all the time. We use all kinds of means of communication. Animals do it, right? They chirp at each other. They bark at each other. They make noises. They do dances. They do all kinds of fun stuff. There are means of communication. The creation itself is a means of communication to you. That's how you know that the one true God exists. That's how you know through the Scriptures what the meaning of the resurrection is. That the resurrection actually took place. That the resurrection, which is evidence, right? And the resurrection is attested to. It's well attested, and so we got to go through all those things. Frank Turek's correct about that. But it's not neutral, right? It's the evidence in and of itself, by itself, isn't telling us something. It's God through the evidence that is telling us something. So that's my quick theological thought for the day. So I like these guys. They're good guys. They're out there doing it. They're on the front lines. God bless them. But I just think we all want to be accurate in what we're doing, right? We all want to be better at what we're doing. We want to be right about what we're doing. And so that's my encouragement to those of you who are out there thinking, how do I talk to non-Christians about, how do I know which God is the one true God? It's the Scriptures are the ultimate infallible source of the rule of faith for the Christian. It is God speaking. It's self-attesting, and you have to come and see that. And it corresponds to the evidence in the world around us. And the world spends a lot of time trying to show that the Bible does not correlate to the evidence in the world. That's why I believe in creation science. I'm an advocate for creation science. Why? Because I believe evolution has deceived people to get people to think that they can't trust the Bible. No, the Bible corresponds to the world around us, and it corresponds quite well. And it definitely corresponds to the evidence of the resurrection. So anyway, God bless. Be good.